So I don't know about you, but I just finished watching season 2, episode 5.
So did I. I didn't even know I was one to watch until you told me.
What was it called? Hold on.
Need.
I was gonna call it Speed, but like, oh, you got the need for speed, and that makes sense.
Well, Daniel might as well have been on Speed, so you're not wrong.
It's just very apropos, sir. So, what did you think of the episode? Talk us through it. What's your synopsis? Give me the details of it.
You know, this episode. It's weird because when you look back on it after having watched the series a couple times, it's kind of forgettable. But when you're watching it, it's actually not that bad. It's one of those where it kind of flies into the radar. It doesn't really fit into the overall story, aside from the fact that we find out about the sarcophagus and why it's like, how it works and what it does and this sort of thing. But it's just kind of a self-contained episode. It just kind of does what it does, and then it scoots under the radar, and then it's done. But I'm trying to think of other examples of this from this early in the series, but it's definitely an early example of Michael Shanks trying to flex his acting chops. He's, Hi Daniel is basically Michael Shanks twirling his acting mustache and saying, "Hey, look at me, I can earn big bucks," which of course comes back to bite us later when he gets himself killed off the series because he's too big for his britches.
Junkie Daniel. It's always fun.
Yeah.
It
comes back later.
It wasn't quite to the point of the after school special of I learned it from watching you, Dad. But it was I liked it. So you get this they go to this planet and it looks like it's ran by Gould. And then they get captured. And then no, because Daniel sees a girl that's about to jump off a cliff. I say girl, she's 25. And this 25-year-old woman's about to jump off a cliff. And then he stops her. And then she tells her dad, the local king, that, oh, Daniel Jackson tried to kill me. And so he banishes them all to the mine. And through, a fun twist of fate, the mine collapses. They try to escape. They can't. Daniel Jackson gets thrown in a sarcophagus to to get healed up, and the other three are sent to this death mine to mine Naquita, which is their special sort of dilithium crystal type, all-purpose future space.
It's the handwavium mineral.
What's that?
It's the handwavium mineral.
Oh yeah. It's the you wouldn't get this, but it's the sonic screwdriver from Doctor Who.
No, I get that.
So it's which is effectively a magic wand.
It's basically a MacGuffin.
It's a MacGuffin.
If you're familiar with that term, it's a MacGuffin, which is basically an item, or maybe not even an item. It's a part of a plot of usually a genre piece, not always a genre piece, but usually a genre piece that is vital to the plot, but does not affect the plot directly. Some people have called the Ring of Power, like the One Ring, or the Rings, the ultimate MacGuffin, because the entire plot revolves around it, but it doesn't technically have any agency. I mean, yes, it does have agency, but it doesn't actually do anything. It's carried around by the characters the entirety of the movies or books or whatever.
Yeah, and it's like Episode 9 of Star Wars, The Rise of Skywalker, was all a fetch quest for various MacGuffins. The characters have to get this thing. Why? Thinly thought out, barely fleshed out reasons. And then they go out and get this thing. Right. And that thing leads them to the next thing. It's a series of fetch quests. And so that's what Naquita often is in Stargate.
Yep. And an even better example than the One Ring that I just thought of is Marcellus Wallace's briefcase from Pulp Fiction. Yes. The entire plot revolves around it, at least the parts that involve Samuel L. and John Travolta.
Yes.
But we never know what's in it. It has no agency. It's literally carried around by the characters. It's just this thing, but the entire plot could not move forward.
And so throughout this, you learn Daniel Jackson becomes sort of like the princess consort, right? The girl who has been locked in that tower by her 700-year-old father that has been rejuvenating himself in a sarcophagus this whole time because he killed the Gould 700 years ago. And so now he's just pretending to be one. takes a liking to Daniel because she's never left the palace before, and she thinks he's her destiny, which that's pressure on a new relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And but to be fair, when I met my wife, I was like, oh, like you don't say you're my destiny on like the third date, but it's okay if you think it. I thought it. By date 3, I'm like, I'm like, oh, this has legs. This has long legs. Like this is it. This is the marriage.
Yeah.
Like,
So, but yeah,
but
you definitely don't want to say it on the first friggin' like going out together.
Especially if her dad has all of your friends locked up in a slave death mine.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, she keeps putting him in the sarcophagus, and it turns and. But like, if you learn that if a healthy person hits the sarcophagus pipe too many times, they get like this. It's like if the dude's smoking crack, he gets it's a narcotic effect. He's got heightened senses. He feels better. He kind of turns into a bit of a fuckboy, right? Like
pretty much.
Michael Shanks does fuckboy real nice, which sounds sexier than I meant it to.
I speak flippantly of Michael Shanks' acting chops because it's kind of like an in-joke on the Stargate fandom, about how he's like always he's kind of like the Stargate SG1 equivalent of like Leonardo DiCaprio, basically chasing accolades in a manner of speaking. But he does have good acting chops. I mean, he would not get all those cool like specialty roles in the series if he didn't have good acting chops. I mean, the classic example that I can think of, there's an episode, I want to say it's in season 8, because I know it's later in the series. It's after he comes back from the dead the first time, as you do.
As you do.
It's where he I don't know if you may remember it, you may not, but we'll probably get to it, maybe a couple years down the line. It's the one where Daniel has the consciousness of several people on that like crashed like generation ship or like crashed sleeper ship downloaded into his mind, and he's like acting. He's like, it basically develops a multiple personality disorder. Like he's got this little kid in his head, and he has to act like this scared little kid. He has this like despot in his head, and he's acting like this tyrannical despot, and he's doing all of this while also having Daniel in there. And it's basically just an excuse for Daniel Jackson to say, hey, I can do all these things. Look at me, NA special.
I always assume that a big part of getting many roles and consistently working and acting is, once you make it through that luck filter, is you show up on time, you've got your lines memorized, and you're not impossible to work with.
Yeah.
Like if you
sometimes not even having your lines memorized, because you look at some of the most famous roles, like maybe not famous is the right word, but like some of the biggest roles in recent history, arguably, Robert Downey Jr. as Iron Man is a pretty big role, because that basically built one of the biggest franchises in the world right now, and it made Robert Downey Jr. pretty wealthy. I believe off of the sales. He pretty much improvised a lot of his lines. So you don't even necessarily have to memorize your lines. You basically just got to be relatively pleasurable to work with, and you got to show up to the set.
Okay, if you're RDJ, you don't have to memorize your lines. But there's a reason he went from like a drug addicted guy who broke into people's houses and did time. The dude did like time. Like he spent a couple years locked up, right?
Yeah.
Because he hit rock bottom hard.
But see, that's the thing. It's just like breaking the law. There's ways around punishment for breaking the law. You just have to have the right connections. Unfortunately, it's kind of like you can almost get around the requirement to be pleasurable to work with if you have the right connections and if you're like a really good actor.
But I think okay, so from what I understand with RDJ, around Iron Man time, he's clean, he's hitting his probation, I'm guessing. He's just staying the fuck out of trouble. And then he kind of it was a combination of the right people at the right place at the right time. And you've got to be like the wiliest, quickest motherfucker in the world to go from an orange jumpsuit and chains to being fucking Iron Man and like getting paid $20 million just to show up in Spider-Man Far From Home or No Way Home or whichever one it was, or Homecoming.
Yeah.
Like he's in that movie for maybe 15 minutes. He's in there for 4 scenes. And he got paid well in excess of $10 million. He went from 10 years before that, he's in an orange jumpsuit and fucking chains. And so that man is lightning in a bottle. And also he had the right people help him get clean. And like, you know, that's a once in a generation, once in a lifetime sort of dude who can go hit rock bottom and bounce way up, way fast. For the average person, if you and me were actors, I would imagine for us to get consistent roles, because we're not RDJ, because if we were RDJ, we'd be in the Avengers, you know? Like, we would need to be like pleasure, like not uncomfortable to talk to, show up on time, do the work, know your shit. Like you work at NASA.
Yeah.
I have to imagine for you to consistently get internships at NASA, they like working with you.
Yeah, they seem to. They keep telling me I'm a pleasure to work with. And I'm like, I'll take your word for it. I don't like me, but I guess somebody does.
As long as someone likes you, man, you'll keep getting work. You know, with enough time between you and your therapist, you'll like yourself. Trust me. I did 3 years of therapy. I'm talking to him in 2 days. It's going to be great. But, you know, and so that's probably why like Michael Shanks has such a longevity. He still works to this day. I see him pop up and stuff. Richard Dean Anderson went from being MacGyver to this. Like he was on TV consistently for 20 years.
Yep. Like
every year.
And he's adding things too. There's a series, I've got it on DVD and I've wanted to watch it, but I've never gotten around to it. It's called Legend, where he like basically plays he's a writer in like the turn of the century, like the turn of the 20th century, that is, the time period, like in the Old West. And he's a writer of like dime novels. And he basically teams up with John Delancey, who I believe plays Nikola Tesla in this. And they like solve crimes and like, you know, like deal with ne'er-do-wells in the Old West and like turn of the 20th century America.
It's
like
Castle, but with cowboys.
He basically is like a dime novel writer who takes on the persona of the character he writes, which is named who's Nicodemus Legend, I believe, cool. If I remember the story correctly.
I probably won't watch it, but that's cool. I have to tell you about this while I'm thinking about it, and we're way off topic. But
you're fine. We tend to do that.
We tend to do that.
That's the point of a podcast.
Exactly. Wait, what'd you say?
That's the point of a podcast.
That's the point of a podcast. So I'm flipping through Amazon as I'm looking for SG1, and I come across this thumbnail, and it's called Trump versus the Space Illuminati. And I'm like, well, I have to watch the trailer. Like, I don't know what this is. And I'm watching the trailer, and it's just the cheapest animation you ever saw. It's something that you and I could probably cobble together if we really wanted to. And like the dude, like it's you know, after the end of the world and the machines have taken over from the Illuminati based on the moon, one man is cloned and is awakened from cryosleep. The 45th president, Donald J. Trump. And it's just boom, boom. And I'm like, well, I mean, if I was still smoking weed, like I would light a joint and watch the fuck out of this movie.
See, that's exactly what I'm thinking. Because like, you may have heard of a movie called Attack of the Killer Tomatoes.
Oh yes,
that's from back in the day. When my mother first told me about this movie, and she told me about it when I was probably like 12 to 14 years old. So it's been a hot minute. It's been at least 10, 15 years ago that I first heard about this movie. When she told me about it, we were talking about like silly movies. And I remember it's one of those things. It's like one of those conversations you have with your parent where you like think a little bit differently about them at the time, and it sort of like makes you like laugh lately looking back because it's like seared into your brain.
Oh,
She
yeah.
told me she mentioned this movie and she's like, it's a movie you have to be in a certain frame of mind to enjoy.
It's like it's a thing that would get you arrested in the 1980s.
Things that'll get you arrested unless you're in New York or Illinois or Michigan.
Yeah. Oh man.
And
Anyway.
I'll tell you that's one thing about walking down the street in New York. You smell skunky smell pretty much everywhere you go.
That was definitely a weed friendly place. No, while we're talking about weed, marijuana enthusiast and owner of a dispensary, Kevin Smith, creator of Clerks, is currently sober.
Yeah.
And he just dropped like a half-hour thing where he was talking about his recent mental health problems and how, he's not like weed's the devil, but with his specific thing, he was saying how weed was allowing him to numb himself and mask the issues he was having. And it was really kind of profound to watch, and really, and he was just kind of bearing his soul to the world, which was kind of cool. And he's like, yeah, I haven't smoked weed in a few months now. He went a decade just being high all the time. But which I'm excited to see how the Jay and Silent Bob movies change now that because he's been high as a kite for the last couple, and now he'll be sober again. So that'll be interesting to see. I love everything the man does, right? Everything he does, I'm a fan.
Jay and Silent Bob will be reformed Bible salesmen in the next movie.
Well, they did meet God in the 90s, so
yeah.
Anyway, we'll go. We will do a deep dive View Askew one day, sir. But back to Stargate.
Yep.
So,
swerving back to the actual topic of the podcast.
Actual topic. Well, I mean, I look at Stargate as kind of like a loose framework for what we do. And some of the episodes won't, but there's always going to be.
I said, any good podcast, they may have like points they want to reach or like points they sort of set as guideposts, but the winding path is the journey is the adventure, not the destination.
Exactly. And something that struck me as so cheesy and just deliciously 90s TV sci-fi was when you watch the sarcophagus, and as it's going, and you could see it like it's because as the sarcophagus goes out, it spreads out, like the lid comes off and spreads out like a wing, and it's supposed to close like a wing, like a bug would be, like a scarab.
Mm-hmm.
But as the wooden lid is opening, you can see it kind of jerking. Right?
Yep, I remember that.
Like it needs to be oiled. And I was like, oh, you got two guys on either side with string pulling it. And so that was pretty funny. And throughout the rest of the episode, Daniel Jackson, just turning into a fuckboy junkie, and like he sweet talks the princess and letting them go after they've spent days in the mine, after his friends have spent days in the mine, and he's been getting high and getting laid in the castle with the princess. Which, I mean, if you're gonna be prisoners on an alien planet, if you're gonna do it, pick option A. Don't go to the mine. Like, come on. I don't blame him. He's single. I get it.
He's technically single.
Well, I mean, okay, so now.
I'll tell you this. My dad and I were talking about this because my dad was still here when I was watching this episode, and he said, "I think having a snake in your head counts as an annulment."
I think having this, yes. So he had a wife from the TV show, and then from the movie, and then in the TV show, they're like, "We gotta find Daniel Jackson's wife," and then after a while, he's like, "I think I'm good." And they just kind of like stop looking for her. I mean, they resolved the storyline, but it's not like a driving plot line anymore. And they're like, "Aren't you still married?" And he's like, "I mean, not anymore, guys. Come on, it's been a while." I don't know what you're talking about. But And yeah, he gets back to SGC after he talks the girlfriend into, I guess, the fiance into letting him go. And he's got this. You're right. He was swinging for the fences. He's like, "I'll be back. I promise. Soon." And I'm like, "Oh, you do fuck boy real good." Just that slimy, just junky piece of shit. Sorry, I'm like, "Oh, I've met him before."
He does a very good job at playing in this episode of playing the like sleazy sort of enabler or like codependent boyfriend who's like not quite a jock, not quite a punk, but like somewhere in between, and like it's basically just like bad for the girl, but the girl is like not really good for herself either. And he's kind of like, have you ever seen Casino with the Martin Scorsese movie Casino?
Probably, but go on.
He's kind of like James Woods' character from Casino when he's high Daniel.
Okay, I'll have to see Casino. And then when they get back to the SGC, he starts detoxing, and like I thought this was so funny when he's all like strapped in. And they're like, we got to give him another sedative because he's detoxing, right? Like he's coming off of heroin or something.
Yeah.
And then when Dr. Fraser comes in to like give him like a sedative or something, he grabs her, knocks her over, and then beats the shit out of this guard, right? Takes something big and bashes this motherfucker's brains in, and then leaves. And then Jack O'Neill runs up, and then Fraser's like, I'm okay. And then he leaves. And I'm like, what about the guard? Like,
red shirt.
He just got murdered. You know, he just rocked that dude's fucking whole world.
Sec 4s grow on trees.
Exactly.
At least in the Stargate universe, they do.
Exactly. You know, like I mean, he's just like we got more people here. It's fine. And then he corners Daniel in a supply closet, and he's like, I gotta go back. And then he's just detoxing, and Jack O'Neill is like, it's okay, I love you. And then they hug, because apparently Jack O'Neill's also detoxed off of things, and I detoxed off of nicotine. I get it. You're not in a good spot. Like,
that's another thing I talked about with my dad when we were watching this episode. He's like, I don't think I could ever forgive Daniel for this. And I sort of took him to task for it. Maybe not took him to task, like reminded him. You realize that Daniel got in the sarcophagus the first time because he died. Again, basically died or was badly wounded. Then he got in the sarcophagus the second time to try and like smooze with the girl so that she would listen to him and let his friends go. And then from there he was hooked. And it's basically, fuck, we're done. It's like, it's basically the equivalent of, leaning on the metaphor we've already established. It's the equivalent of, I'm going to take this hit of morphine with you so that you will, be more responsible. And then you get hooked too. Yeah. Basically. And then Daniel's like, then he's not in his right frame of mind for like the next 20 minutes of the episode or 25 minutes of the episode. And, basically it becomes a story of, we got to try and fix Daniel because he's now not regular Daniel. It's like, the thing that really sort of hammers it home was when they get back to the SGC and they're in Carter's lab, and Daniel's like, you've never really known what love is, have you? And Carter's like, see, the Daniel I know would never say that, something like that. And you're like, and that's where one of those like checkpoints where you realize, Daniel's not doing okay right now.
Daniel's not here anymore. Please call back later.
Yeah.
But yeah, just to wrap it up though, and then Daniel gets clean, and then they go back to the other world, and then the father's dead, and he talks to the girl, and she's like, you never loved me, and he's like, I don't not love you. Like, I don't hate you.
He says, I wouldn't be here if I didn't care, which is a very nice way of saying I don't love you, but I do care about you.
Yeah. I'm single. You're hot and 23. We can make this work, right?
I mean, another thing that I think one thing that's important to point out is that when like Daniel finally does get at least mostly clean, he suggests going back to the planet, and he says, like, before you say anything, we have to do something to help those people. So that's like his arc coming full circle in this story. It's like he's back to trying to help people, which shows, hey, this is regular Daniel again, because he's thinking about other people before himself.
They reset the character narrative. Yeah,
he wants to go back to the planet, not to chase the orange dragon, but to free all the slaves and death mines.
Yeah, and how, do they? I don't even know if they do that. Like,
yeah. Well, they don't show it. I think the last thing they show is Daniel with the girl, and she like disables the sarcophagus that it can't be used ever again. Which again is like the art, which is like the fulfillment of her character arc. She's now like become a responsible leader that her father could never be, because he basically, it again, like I said at the start of our chat, it's an episode that really kind of is like flies very subtly, but it also has some very good points in it. And like one of those points is basically that, you know, the father who killed the ruling Gould on this planet then became essentially a Gould himself.
Yeah,
that's like the main point of his arc, is that, oh, I killed the Gould, so I'm not gonna rule over my people to keep them safe. But then over the next 700 years of continually using the sarcophagus, he kind of becomes a crazy despot himself. And you know, it's basically like, what's the thing? It's actually something I think I saw when I was reading analysis of Blade Runner at one point. How, you know, when Roy Batty kills Eldon Tyrell, he's, on the one hand, he's killing God, but he's also foregoing the transcendation. I don't know, transubstant, whatever it is. He's foregoing the chance to transcend his own nature. Because what is Roy Batty in Blade Runner? And I'm getting off topic. This is the analogy music, and I'm going to fly with it. Roy Batty in Blade Runner is a killer. He's basically an assassin bot or a soldier bot. He's a warrior. And when he kills Eldon Tyrell, even though that's basically the fulfillment of one arc, which is the arc of, you know, meeting your maker and trying to confront him about what he's done to you by making you, it's also a failure, because it's basically saying, oh, well, Roy Batty, at the end of the day, all you are is a killer. That's all you're capable of. So it's basically him at once. It's I know I could talk endlessly about Blade Runner, so I'm going to try and keep it short. You know, it's that sort of thing, is him fulfilling an arc, but also falling short of an arc. So it's a very brilliant step. And that's kind of what happens with Pyrrhus, which is the father of the girl on this, you know, formerly Gould occupied planet. He manages to free his people, but then he just becomes another dictator. It's like, you know, it's like Star Wars, you know, become the very thing you swore to destroy. You know, it's Batman. You know, you live long enough to see die a hero, live long enough to see yourself become the villain. It's it's all that sort of stuff. And that basically, that sets up Shyla, the girl's arc, which is, oh, I'm going to lead my people diligently and responsibly, and not by using this, you know, alien device to rule them as a friggin' immortal dictator. So she destroys the sarcophagus, or at least it breaks it so that it can't work. And the episode kind of ends on that note of just saying, of her like, oh, I'm going to bring my people out of the mines. You know, there's sort of a throwaway line where Carter says, or maybe Daniel says, we can show them other ways to mine the Naquadah, because, you know, it really is brilliant in many ways, even though it's so sort of understated, because like later on in the series, we know that they have at least one or a couple sources of Naquadah, because, you know, eventually they design the Naquadah generators, which then become like the sort of like a throwaway thing in the show, where it's like, oh yeah, just plug a Naquadah generator and we'll have unlimited, you know, clean energy for whatever this base is, whatever this project is or vehicle is that we need. And this planet is probably one of the sources of that Naquadah, because they've now got this friendly ruler in place on this planet. It's basically, this is another one of those cases where if you look at it from a certain point of view, you know, like, again, going back to Star Wars, a certain point of view, it's basically them coming in and installing a friendly ruler on some planet so they can then get a source of raw material.
I mean, wouldn't be the
U.S.
first
government
time.
strikes again.
Wouldn't be the first time.
Nope. Definitely not.
Oh man, that's funny. Yeah, it's an example of the little building blocks that the show does so well. These self-contained stories that are individual building blocks that create such a grander, broader narrative. I you know, it for me, there's not bad episode here. I mean, some episodes are more substantial, some stick in my memory better, but all of them are like, oh yeah, I really like this show, and I'm glad we're doing the rewatch.
I think we touched on this before in our chats, probably way back when we started doing this. You know, there's episodes of this series that I don't really care for as much as well. Like this, you know, the one that comes to mind that we've passed over so far is the Emancipation, which is the one where Carter gets captured on the like sexist alien planet or whatever it is. I don't usually watch that one because it's just annoying. I don't like to see this like sort of meat-headed, that's not meathead, like heavy-handed
ham-fisted
take, ham-fisted. That's what I'm going for. This ham-fisted take on like, you know, the topic of women's liberation, which is an important topic. But I do appreciate the episode for what it tries to do, even if I don't always watch it because it doesn't gel with me. I appreciate that they were trying to go for something, and even though it's not maybe my favorite episode, I can find good things in it. You know, there's not really an episode. There's Star Trek in many cases has episodes that are like that. You know, Prophet and Lace comes to mind, or the one where Wesley Crusher gets sentenced to death for stepping on the grass. Episodes like that come to mind in Star Trek, where it's like, you didn't really need to do that. The one we talked about where they go to the planet that's like ruled by like people from Africa, and it's like, oh yeah, look, we have all these black people and they're ruling a planet. Aren't we like cool for doing this? The one where they like the Enterprise brings on a load of like Irish immigrants, basically from like the 19th century. There's some weird episodes, but there's still like little kernels of what makes Star Trek good, which is this, like they're trying to tackle like real world problems, you know, the human condition, all this stuff. You know, basically all boils down to that thing that Nichelle Nichols said, you know, may she rest in peace. Back when she was still alive, she said in an interview once how she had, you know, she was in her makeup chair one day when they were making the original series back in the 60s. And she was in her makeup chair, and Gene Roddenberry was standing in the hair and makeup room, sort of talking with the actors. And she was reading her script maybe. And she turned to him and said, you know what you're doing? You're doing morality plays, but you're setting it in space so people will not notice that it's morality plays. And he's like, you're pretty much onto something there. Pretty much basically all sci-fi is, at least most sci-fi, is that we're basically dealing with the human condition and things in our own society. We're just doing it with lasers and spaceships and occasionally other things, and sort of dressing it up so that it becomes more palatable to people who might not like those subjects if they were presented in, you know, non-genre fiction.
Speaking of which, how is your work on Shadowplay coming along?
It's coming slowly. I've been a bad noodle. I've been devoting a little bit of time to trying to polish up a story that I was bouncing around. God bless. I can't remember even how long ago I started it, but you know how I am. I'll start a story and I'll write like maybe a couple chapters, and then I'll get bored, or I'll like have a new idea that I want to go play with. It's like it's basically the next shiny new toy. So I'll go play with that for a while, and then I'll start another new thing. And that's pretty much what I'm doing here. It's just a story called Alphas that I've been playing with, and I basically I turned the chapters that I had written into a couple of episodes of a screenplay for like a miniseries, just so I could have something creative to do that could then maybe get me back into the swing of things to do shadow play. Because I think the thing that's holding me, what's up?
This is a screenplay. It's not a short
well, no,
story.
It's both a screen. Yeah, it's both. Here's what it is. It's a novel. It's like a chapter novel.
Yeah.
But I took the chapters that I had written, which is like maybe 8 or 9, which again, funny, that's about how long I make it before I start to get bored, as you probably can tell from looking at Europa Goodbye. But I took those chapters and I basically just copy pasted and dropped them into a Keltex document. Keltex being a popular screenplay formatting software, or it's like a free software. Actually, I pay for it. So I can have more projects open at once. Like you only get a certain number of projects available if you have the free version. But if you pay like a certain amount a month or a certain amount a year, you get extra projects, and I do that because it gives me the ability to write as many screenplays as I want. But anyway, I just copy pasted the text of the manuscript that I was working on for the book, dropped it into Keltex, and formatted it into a couple screenplays for like a couple episodes. I'm aiming for the basically what I'm doing, to put it another way, to put it in a probably a way that makes a little more sense than what I just said, is I'm writing the book and the screenplay at the same time. Like last night, I was literally taking like a chapter that I wrote that was actually ahead of what I'd written before. I'd basically written up to like the end of chapter 8 or partway through chapter 8. And then I skipped ahead to like chapter 16 or something. And I took chapter 16, which is the chapter that image that I showed you goes with. And I took chapter 16 and dropped it into a new episode, like episode 4, I want to say, of the screenplay, because Keltex lets you not only make screenplays, it lets you make episodic series. You can make a number of episodes, and you can like select between different episodes on the sidebar and go between them. So like, let's say you've got a 10-part miniseries or a 6-part miniseries, which is what I'm aiming for this to be. You can have 6 like subheadings on the drop down bar on the left, and you can just click between them, and you can have the script for the different episodes in there like that. So you can basically go back and forth between your different episodes in the same series, which is the same project, but they're still separate screenplays. Because obviously, go ahead.
These screenplays that can be recorded as like an audio drama.
Oh yeah, this should probably make it actually very easy to record it as an audio drama. Because I don't know if you've ever read like a screenplay, or maybe even like a stage play. Basically, what they are is there's two things in a screenplay. There's stage direction and there's dialogue. That's pretty much it. There's other things too, like there's basically like scene headers and things. That's one of the things that makes Keltex special, is that it helps format the screenplay for you. You don't have to use tab and everything to do it manually. You just press tab or press control, whatever, to press control 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whatever, to create the little, like the tab to create the headings for the different sections and stuff. But there's basically scene direction or stage direction and dialogues. Basically, there'll be parts where it'll say like Alpha 98 walks up to the guy and pumps around into his head just for good measure or something like that. And then there'll be dialogue where it has the name of the person talking, Alpha 98 or Senator Alderson or whatever, and then what they say in the context of what they say. So it'll be like, Alpha 98, we need to get out of here before the QRF shows up or something like that.
I look forward to seeing it or taking a look at it. That might be a thing where I'd want to do a rewrite before we record it.
No, sure thing. I got you. Because that's the cool thing about having Keltex and Google Docs, is I can basically just have both of them open like in two different tabs on the internet and just sort of bounce back and forth. Like if I make a change in one, what's up?
Can you focus on shadow play?
Yes, I can. As soon as I'm done here, as soon as I'm done chatting with you, I'm probably gonna get cleaned up, because if I don't know if you've noticed, I've been scratching my head a lot. I ran out of shampoo a couple weeks ago, like before I went to New York.
How did you run out of shampoo?
Because I used up the last of my shampoo and I didn't get to the store before I went to New York, and then I was using my friend's shampoo because I was obviously staying with him. And the problem is, I use anti-dandruff shampoo. So like when you stop using anti-dandruff shampoo for a couple of weeks, you start getting itchy and flaky, and it's not fun.
I probably have 6 months worth of shampoo in my house.
I usually I'm not responsible like you. I just get it when I need it. I probably should have gotten a backup when I went and got the one that I have now, but I'm just going to get cleaned up. And then as soon as I'm done getting cleaned up, I'm going to get to work on shadow play, because I don't really have anything else going. I've got some projects for work, but they're not like urgent.
Work comes first, obviously. But.
Yeah, I'll work on work as well as shadow play, because basically the rest of this week and maybe even next week, I'm going to be sitting around sort of, just working on little things here and there, and obviously putting out fires to get myself to Maryland. I
would love to have shadow play back before you leave. This episode will air by the time you're already in Goddard.
Yeah.
But, because I think I mean, I don't see a reason why that, you know, Shadowplay will start to get released chapter by chapter probably sometime in the next 6 months.
Yep.
Like it's there, you know. And then yeah, we'll figure out whatever the next thing we're gonna do is. Where are you in Shadowplay?
I am still pretty much where I was because I just slacked off, and I have to apologize. That's my fault. I think probably what it was, I was like going strong right up until I went on my trip. And usually like when I get distracted from something for a while, it's hard to get back into the swing of things. Cause it's kind of like why when I write like say I'm writing a chapter for a book, whether it be a new book or whatever, I usually try and write it all in one sitting. And the reason I do that is because if I have to come back to it, it's hard to find the same groove that I was in when I was writing it the first time. And it's like, it's kind of like, it's really hard to, I mean, you probably know, you probably are familiar with this in some way from your own creative work, but for me, it's almost hard to, it's almost impossible to describe, because it's basically like trying to recapture an emotion when that emotion is gone.
Hello, stranger. Do you like to read?
Read? What's happening? Am I dead?
I bet you like zombie books.
I like food. Do you have food?
You don't need food at dividedbyzerobooks.com. It's full of nutrient-rich science fiction.
Ugh, I'm stuck in an ad, aren't I?
Once I stop talking, reality will collapse until someone plays this ad again. This isn't the first time we've had this discussion, and it won't be the last. Hello, stranger. Do you like to read?
Because we're at about 2 hours now, so I can chop this into 2 episodes. And fuck, man, I needed this. My anxiety was sky high. I was recording this thing where I called it. It's I don't even know what it's going to be, but the working title is "Poor, White, and Conservative," and it's about growing up like that.
Go ahead. I'm trying to get my dog over here.
You're all right. I grew up poor, white, and conservative, and it's about growing up like that and how hard it is when you grow up in the mud and you want to leave the mud, and how fucking lonely it can be. How fucking lonely it can be sometimes when, you know, everybody else, no one wants to leave the mud because they've told themselves that's all that exists is the mud. And you're like, well, no, there's dry land over there. You just got to teach yourself how to walk. And everyone's like, well, why would I teach myself how to walk? I live in the mud. And you're like, yeah, but the mud's terrible and there's demons and you got, it'll give you like a bacteria infection. The mud's awful. Nah, I'll just stay in the mud. And because they're like, well, I'm not good enough to be out in the mud. I'm trash. Trash belongs to the mud. That's where I am. All the hope's been beaten out of my life, whatever. And then when someone actually builds a rocket ship and escapes the mud, and everybody, and you come back with your rocket ship, you're like, hey guys, hop on the rocket ship, let's go. And they'll just fight you, right? And so it's fucking lonely sometimes, man. Because I have a lot of really good people in my life, and I met them about 2016.
Mm-hmm.
There's a few carryovers, but a few army people that I've known for a while. I mean, Cassie, I'll probably always have Cassie in my life in one way or another, but it's hard. And I know a lot of people now in the middle class, upper middle class, that they look at sort of the poor white conservative people, and people who talk about pull themselves up by their bootstraps, and they're like, they talk, oh, there's actually racist implications to that, and it's actually supposed to be a metaphor for something you can't do. None of that shit matters, because the idea, don't worry about the phrase. It's kind of like, the difference between an automatic and semi-automatic weapon. Doesn't fucking matter. The things massacre people all the time. A gun is a gun. But the idea of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps just means that you got yourself out of poverty on your own. And the reason why the poor white conservative set is so into that idea is because they've been told there's no other option. They've been told that that's all they deserve. They've been told that they don't have an inherent value as a human. There's no one else going to show them. They don't know about institutional family knowledge, which generates wealth across the centuries and generations, and any of it. They just know that they are entirely on their own. And they've been told that anyone else who says you're not on your own, who is trying to get you dependent on them, is trying to control you and take what little you have. And the reason you have so little is because there's just so little to go around. There's not enough for everybody. So if we give some to these people, well, that comes off of your table, doesn't it? This is what they hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm trying to present the ideas from the perspective of someone who lived it and be like, hey, this is why. And talking down to people like that doesn't do anything, and that keeps them stuck in the mind virus cult. Makes them believe in Jewish space lasers and, Robert Kennedy's going to be president. And, that COVID was a hoax and the vaccine is poison and, Russia's not really all that bad. Like it creates that. And don't be wrong, the left has its fucking laundry list of weird shit, but it's more, I almost feel like I want to explain to people why you poor white conservative people think the way they do. And so if you understand how they think, much like our talk about NCOs earlier, maybe you can help them. I don't know. Maybe if I can figure it out, maybe I can not be so fucking lonely. I don't know. Like, there's a lot there, a lot of emotional shit to unpack. Let me ask you this, sir, and then we'll log off here.
Sure thing.
So currently, this is you as a co-host of Blank Fortress of Solitude, right?
Yep.
There's two versions of it currently, and this just kind of occurred naturally, right?
Yep.
The idea being, I would record a podcast with you every single day if I thought it was sustainable. It's probably not. You and I both have enough shit going on. So if you and me get one out a week, we're doing great if you do it consistently. And so on the Patreon page, I think I found a guy who is who wants to record every week, right? And so I would love to have a free episode and a paid episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
He's my buddy Raj.
Yep.
Now, and I told him about you. And in my head, I'm like, oh, I kind of have two podcast partners. That's kind of cool. And it would be great to like have two consistent podcasts like that running, two variations of it. Mm-hmm. However, with Raj, it's not so much Stargate and writing. It's deep dives into emotions, feelings. Why do people act the way they do? Why do they think the way they do? You should guest on it. You should hop on it. I'd love for you to meet him.
I'd love to. Yeah.
And he's a good guy. And yeah, and so I have this sort of I'm collecting people to build our rocket ship, basically. Mm-hmm. I did a version of this with Divided by Zero books, but I kind of stalled out, which is fine. Sometimes I'm kind of on the third iteration of everything. of building a rocket ship. And I'm self-teaching myself how to build a rocket ship, basically. And so the idea being there's you, and then there's Raj. And I'm like, oh, that's 3. 3 makes a team. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I don't know. I would so love to grow that into something consequential, you know, where you and me are doing one show, I'm doing another show with him over here. You know, you're taking great ownership of the frequency. You're thinking about literature for warriors, how that's going to go. I'm loving that. I'd love to work with Raj to develop another piece. And all the while, I get to be creative and then kind of see this rocket ship build a piece at a time, you know. And
Yep.
Shadow Play is going to be a fantastic addition to the rocket ship. I'm so excited for it. I'm so excited for fucking literature for warriors to take off like that. Yeah. Anyway, sir, I'm gonna hop off because I think I've talked about 2 hours straight. I definitely needed this,
Yeah,
and
me
I think
too.
we'll sign off here for the. Go ahead.
Trivia Thursday.
I don't know.
I thought it was every week, or at least there's somewhere every week, isn't there?
Let me go with the boss.
Gotcha. No problem.
For the Blanket Fortress of Solitude, I am Derwin.
And I'm Nick.
We will see you next Monday morning at 0700.
No! I can't believe it. All of the toilet paper's gone.